can be it. That's what knowledge is. That's what wisdom is. And when you have that, then it's a total learning, mind, body, and spirit. With white people, it's only mind. And those who get the spirit, it's by accident, the Einsteins and the others that do the breakthrough stuff. But in us, it's our culture. It's in our culture, but we need to be able to explicate it, use that word, and apply it. And so that's crucial. So that example you're given is very, very important, because that living example, in this case, it also said, well, I can do it. But it's the being of it. She was seeing somebody living it. You know what I mean?
There's a proverb that says children learn more from what you are than what you teach.
You better believe it. My friend who lives right in front of me said he's a master father, got him 3 brilliant daughters. And he said, brother, it's not your talk, it's your walk. You know what I mean? And that's his whole manifestation. And I know his wife, who does even more of the raising than he does, Brother Joe Levine, he don't like his name. I'm going to acknowledge him. He's a master father, but he's typical of a whole lot. You know what I mean? He lives what he talks. It's his walk that is his teaching. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, that's key. Now, so that explains something right there. Overall, in looking at the Learning Center and what you call supplementary education, what's the overall value of that for Black folks? Supplementary education. Why is that so important? And not only for what you've been doing, but right now as well.
Well, like I've said it time and again, see, like I say, children learn more from what you are than what you teach. See, we can embed and make it relevant what we teach into our culture. And we also try to work with the kids to let them know not only what they can be, but what they should be. I mean, when you learn this stuff, you know, how's you going to use that to benefit your community? The one thing that made me the most proud was when I found out that several of the kids we work with, although a lot of them don't live in Kansas City anymore, but they have learning centers wherever they live, in the cities they living in.
Wow.
I think I had a documentary that one friend of mine sent me. I know I sent it to Ajamu. I don't know if I sent it to you or not. Well, they had a bunch of the former students on my 80th birthday. They made a documentary and they emailed it to me. It's a 2-part documentary, half hour each. I think Webster saw it. I thought I sent it to you too, though. I'm not sure.
No, I didn't get it. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I'd add to that supplementary, what you call supplementary education, is probably the most important intervention we can make as a community in education, because we can have the biggest mass effect on our people through these after school or supplementary school programs. And we need them, as you were saying when we were talking earlier in the week, it needs to parallel the schools the kids go to, that the community needs to be running. You know what I mean? Because now we have a skills mismatch where we have a lot of young Blacks who are not getting the kind of skills that will enable them to even take care of a family, especially Black males, but increasingly females as well. And so a lot of these skills that we're going to get into that you teach at the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center, those are skills that need to be ingrained in our students, our young people. And then if they're in the public schools, hopefully you take them over, but whether you do or not, that is giving them some backup. And I know that's what you've been able to provide. Now, can you get into the origin or the genesis of the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center? How did the Learning Center come about? What role did your cultural vision, both you and your partner that co-founded this, have in your ability to organize the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center?
Well, I think I mentioned this earlier, like when Grace was working with some young kids that the people at the school were having a hard time with. And so like he started giving them some culture related material to read. And they said, well, Mr. Grace, we like what you're doing. Say, can you teach? He said, if you follow me over to this church, so like that's why he started in the church. Because now he could, like, you know, you didn't have to get approval from authorities in terms of what we're going to use to teach the kids, you know. Well, I did the same thing, like I say, in Reverend Cleaver's church with respect to math and make it culturally related. And so, like, so then we joined and started the Learning Center. And then when you're teaching the basic essence, reading, writing, and arithmetic, we use culture-related material to do that. To motivate the kids to, like, not only do they learn how to read, write, and arithmetic, but learn how to use it to benefit the community. And also learn how our community contributed to that. And so, like, you know, I could go on, but I'll stop with that, you know. It's time for Ajamu to run his stuff down.
No, it's not. We got a few more questions for you, and then we go to Ajamu. You in the book on the W.E.B. Bois Learning Center, Future in Our Hands, you said one of the reasons that the two of you, Grace and you, who were the co-founders, could work well together, and one of the reasons that you were able to grow the center was the dualities that existed between the two of you, that you all each had a trait that the other one didn't have, and then both had similar traits. And I think that's an important thing, not only to explain how the center was able to get up off the ground and move, but also how organizing does in general. So what were some of those qualities that Grace brought to the table that you didn't, that you brought to the table that Grace didn't?
Well, to use a cliche, I often say, like, what are the differences between me and Grace? Grace could relate well with the brothers in the streets, and I could relate well with the brothers in the suites. And so
we are Dixon poetry there.
So we were pulled together because we had kids coming there from some of them, the street kids and the parents, you know, like middle and sometimes low income, you know, and then we had some people, middle class people, you know, so like we had kids from all various backgrounds. So the Learning Center had staff members that could relate to the various backgrounds. I never will forget this one teacher was telling me about this one young man she was trying to work with, and she couldn't get him to listen. So I just pulled aside and said, take him to Grace. So Grace knew how to relate to it better than she could, you know. And then I remember one time this one sister, she had, you know, like sister at the Learning Center called me in the office because she's working with this, trying to talk with this one lady who had this son, and she had a hard time working with the son, and it was about 7 o'clock in the evening. So I was trying to explain to the son, I said, open up the window, the shades, and look. I said, look out there. I said, you see that? That's the known universe. Nobody in the known universe loves you as much as this lady right here. Talking about his mother. You know, I said, that's a nice shirt you got. Where'd you get it from? I said, my mother bought it. I said, what about them shoes? My mother bought it. I say, like, so your mother's doing everything she can to help you. So what are you doing? I say, like, those are things you expect your mother to do. Buy you the shoes, the clothes, and feed you and stuff like that. I said, what do you think your mother expects out of you? He said, like, to make A's. I said, Sigma said, no, do good. I said, no. I said, all your mother wants out of you is for you to do your best. Whatever that is. Maybe it's making A's. Maybe it's making C's. We had one young man with a Down syndrome. He wasn't going to make A's in school, but he could do his best. And so I took that boy, put my hand on his back like that and turned him around. And then I said, look your mother in the eye. I said, can you look at your mother in the eye and tell her you're doing your best? He broke down and started crying, you know. I said, that's all she wants from you is your best, whatever that is.
That's an event he'll never forget.
And I learned that from my grandmother, because when I went off to school, my grandmother was a high school graduate, but she didn't go to college and so forth. And so when I got the scholarship, and although it was athletic scholarship to go off to school, she said, "Son, you really interested?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I tell you what," I said, "if this is what you want to do, I'm gonna support you, but I'm gonna ask you for one thing in return." And I just looked at her. She said, "Whether you make it or not, all I want you to do is when you come back to look me in the eye and say you did your best."
Mm-hmm.
She didn't say make A's, which I did. She didn't say pass, which I did. All she asked for me was to do my best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I promote to the kids. Whatever that is, just be able to look your parents in the eye and tell them you did your best.
And, the Learning Center has been around for over 40 years. What was the attitude or attitudes, or what is it that enabled you and the others who worked with you to keep this going all the time? What was the attitude that you had?
Well, that's a good question. But a little footnote. Next year will be our 50th anniversary.
Okay, 50.
We started in 73. Next year is
50.
83, so it'll be our 50th anniversary. But like I say, the children learn more from what you are than what you teach. So we have to be like role models that represent what these kids need to aspire to be. And so, like I say, one of my former teachers, that's almost more important than what we're teaching. See, we demonstrating how you can use your background to benefit the community by being a living example of that. I don't know, did that address your question?
Yeah, there was a part in there where you said in your book, you said something about, we made the decision to stick to it. We're going to stay in there. You know what I mean? We're going to hang in there. But yeah, it pretty well answers it.
Well, see, like once we started the Learning Center, I never will forget. We tutored some kids, and one mother said, "Y'all gonna do this next year?" When we first started, we said, "Yeah." And so, and I remember telling Grace, I said, "It's gonna take about 5 years before our community recognizes the Learning Center as a community institution. Mm-hmm. It's gonna take about 5 years to build ourselves up as a community organization. You just can't just do it one few times and then quit. Mm-hmm. It's going to take time to build up that reputation." Mm-hmm. And so we had people who were committed to just do that. And over the years, we've been able to continue. And see, like Ajamu can speak to this better than me, because he can tell you about what motivated him to join the Learning Center and get involved and stick with it.
Yeah, go ahead, Ajamu.
When I came to Kansas City, the Learning Center was working out of church, Second Baptist Church on 39th and Monroe. And what motivated me was the dedication that the staff had. This is all volunteer staff. These are people who are, have worked out there with Mr. Dixon at Allied Signal. So these were professionals. These were school teachers who were doing their daily job, weekly job, and then taking 2 hours on Saturdays or on Wednesday nights teaching. So that dedication inspired me. But one quick story, this is maybe the first or second time that I came out. And I remember Vern Glover, who was a longtime math teacher with Brother Leon. And I actually worked with him when I first started. And he was getting to his car, and a young student ran behind him and complaining about the homework assignment, because even though this is Saturday school, you still get homework. And he said, Mr. Glover, do you realize you gave us 32 problems of work? And Vern Glover shook his head and said, yeah, do them twice. So that kind of dedication showed me that this is serious. These folks are serious. And that's the reason why I walked in the classroom and stayed with it for almost 30 years.
Wow. So you're still doing tutoring in the school?
No, I'm no longer a tutor. I've served as a tutor, served as a board, but the institution is continually moving. There's folks that are there now that continue to keep it going. Brother Leon mentioned that, but there's a director who is involved. There's parents who are involved. He doesn't have to do much organizing anymore. All he has to do is continue to be the fountain of wisdom as it relates to the program and the keeper of the history. And then, of course, he goes down and he teaches, whenever he gets ready. So with that being the case, it's an institution. It goes on, even though the founders not necessarily have to be as engaged as they were in the beginning. It goes on.
That's a key point.
It makes me think of this African proverb: young man for war, old man for counsel.
Uh-huh.
So I'm at the counseling stage now.
Yeah, and that is the nature of good organizing and good institution building. You got to pass it on. You know what I mean? So you started off in the Black church and then you acquired your own building. How did you get to the building stage? How did you acquire your own building?
Well, I was also like affiliated. It's a political organization called Freedom Incorporated that I worked with them too. And see, and they were given a building. And so I asked the chairman at the time, I said, well, can we use the building to tune the math in? So he said, yeah. So we started tutoring math in their building. And Ajamu might can add to this because Ajamu had one of his friends and he down in my basement listening to the music, and the phone rang, And so this guy was telling me their organization is running into trouble and they owed some people some money and they was going to be forced to sell that building to pay these people their money back. So rather than lose the building, he said, no, I'm going to give it to another organization. So he asked me, he said, do y'all have a 501? I said, yeah, we have a 501c3. So he said, who's chairman? I said, I am. I mean, we didn't have any meetings before then, So he came by the house and the Ajamu told the friend, man, be quiet. Listen. So when he came over there, and the only person in the room affiliated with the Learning Center at the time was Ajamu and me, because he had his friend. And that's when he offered us to take over the building so that the community would not lose the building. And so I got on the phone and called Grace. I said, Grace, you got to come over here right now. And so that's how we ended up with that building.
Mm. That sounds like a story, this Black community stories. We had a Black newspaper, we still have it, called the Sun Reporter in San Francisco. It's now in the Hunters Point. And this is how they got the Sun Reporter. The Sun was owned by an older brother. He died in his 90s. He wasn't that old then. Thomas Fleming. And the Reporter was owned by a white boy. But what happened is a guy named Carlton Goodlett, who had a PhD in psychology and MD that he got from Black College. He's in a poker game and wins the poker game. And so he wins the Reporter. And so then the Sun becomes the Sun Reporter because Thomas Fleming turns over the Sun to Goodlett, and he ends up owning the Sun Reporter. So I saw that look on your face when I said, how'd you get the building? And I said, uh-oh, this is going to be a story here. I'd never heard that story before. And these are Black stories from the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Now, you made the point that you modeled the W.E.B. Bois Learning Center partially after the church, in that people in the church, a lot of the people in the church don't get paid. And the W.E.B. Bois Learning Center operates off of volunteers. So the question is, because the center has a curriculum, I understand, of science, math, history, culture, literacy, A, how'd you recruit people with those kind of skills? And B, how you get them to volunteer over this 50-year period? I know you've had different people coming in at different times. How you get those volunteers and with skills?
Well, like I say, I was working at Allied Signal, and there's one young man there that went to Southern University, Ajamu News. I think he went there before Ajamu came there, Roy Brown, remember him? And so when I first started, he and Glover were the first volunteers I had. because Glover and I used to walk and say, Dick, we got to do something to help these kids. So I had Roy Brown, and we started the math program. So I called Glover and said, Glover, you remember you said we had to work with these kids? He said, yeah. So I told him about that and said, I'll be over there. The next day, he'd been over there and been with us ever since, But see, we had relationships because I was working in corporate America with other people with technical backgrounds and so forth. I recruited them to come back and volunteer their time. And I often tell people, I say, my generation was the first generation of blacks that had jobs in corporate America. Before that, blacks weren't working in I was working in Bendix, Allied Signal, Honeywell, and we weren't working in corporate America like that. But then we worked in corporate America, and we were making, making good wages, living comfortably above, substantially above our parents and so forth in terms of income. Now, what does that also mean? That means you got leisure time.
Mm-hmm.
Question, what you gonna do with it?
Mm-hmm.
So we just encourage some of our people who had an ounce of consciousness and so forth. Why don't you donate a couple of hours of your leisure time to help out the community? Well, a handful did. And like I tell people, you're not going to get a whole bunch, but just start with a few and let it grow. So I started off with one volunteer, Roy Brown. Then another guy came from Historical Black College, Robert McKinney. You remember him? So he ends up joining. Then here comes Webster, Historical Black College. He joins. And a few others joined, and that. So we just started small and grew.
There's something I really want to stress here, that people think it takes money to build any kind of institution or movement. What it does is take dedicated people. I'm going to give my example. The San Francisco Freedom Movement, which was 6 years in its making, at its high point, 10,000 people. Not a dime to finance that movement. It was a commitment of the people who were involved in it. And so for people here who are listening to this show and want to know how to set up a Saturday or supplementary school, then it's a question of what your commitment is and then your ability to reach out. And I think what Leon has given you is a good example of that.
Can I say one more thing right quick?
Yeah.
I remember even before I started the Learning Center, one of my friends came by the house and he said, Dick, he said, man, you play sports. Why don't you coach one of these little league baseball teams? And I looked at him kind of cross-eyed and said, if I'm going to devote energy and time, it's not going to be on little league baseball. I'm going to teach little league math. I say, given my background, our community is better off by me teaching math than me teaching baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a whole bunch of brothers can teach baseball. There's only a handful of us can teach math, the science, and so forth. So so that's one of the components that drove me into tutoring math and building the Learning Center. What kind of talent do you have, and how is it best used to benefit the community?
Two closing questions. One is, what's been the general size of the population of students that have come in any given year? What's been the number of students on average or whatever? And what are a few steps that you would recommend? I know there's much more to this that we need to go into it in more depth, but a few steps that you would suggest that people can take to set up a learning center.
Well, first of all, I would say study your environment and build off of what you have. And like I said, that's why we went to the churches, because those are the buildings we had. And then, like I said, our generation was producing engineers and so forth. Those are talents that we have in our community. So all you need to have is a handful that's willing to come and volunteer. Work with what you have, in terms of facilities, in terms of the personnel. study your environment, your community, and look at what you have and see how you can best get those people. If they're going to give up volunteer time, how can their volunteer time best benefit the community? And we use the Learning Center as a model for that.
What's been the overall size of the students per
Well,
year?
reason why I'm laughing, I remember one time we first started, one time we had about 20 kids, and the pastor and this place said, look, we got all them kids. And so he was taking pictures and so forth. That's when we first started. We were satisfied. We had about 10, 15 kids, and let alone 20, but then it constantly grew. So you start small and grow. You don't start big.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now we ended up having like 100, 200 kids in there, you know, then we had a waiting list because we couldn't take all the kids that needed help. You know, but start small and grow. Don't try to start big because you overwhelm yourself if you do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what you've had here is a master discussion and class on supplementary schools based on a successful model. And our young people are in need of this, so I hope people will draw from this, and I hope in the future we can do some in-depth training on it. But basically, if you want to do this in your community, you can contact us and we'll show you how to get in touch with Brother Leon Dixon. So next we're going to get into Brother Ajamu, but before that, I want to have a musical break, a brief musical break. If my technician is there. Are you there, brother?
Yes.
Yeah, put that piece of music up. Okay. Get the chat back up. Okay, we're getting into an interview now with Brother Ajamu. It's going to be a PowerPoint presentation that he has on the Afrikan Centered Public School project called the Afrikan Centered Education Collegium campus. And so, Ajamu, you got the floor.
Okay, just want to make sure that can you all see the PowerPoint presentation yet?
It's down on the bottom. Now you have to bring it up.
Okay,
So
let me
that
go ahead and take care of that.
Yeah, now it's there.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So first of all, I guess this is an honor to be on the program to talk about this. And what I want to walk folk through is what we were able to accomplish in Kansas City with what is known as the Afrikan Centered Education Collegium campus. And that was run and sponsored by a board that was created called the Afrikan Centered Education Task Force. So it was connected to NBUF very, very strategically and to the Learning Center. As I said before, there would be no Afrikan Centered Education without the Learning Center, because there would have been no NBUF without the Learning Center. And when the Afrikan Centered Education Collegium campus got started, it was because of activism from NBUF around the question of appropriate education for African children in the Kansas City School District, as I mentioned earlier, during a time when the district was going through a desegregation program and creating all types of culturally based schools. Now, what I'm saying right now is not something I made up. Came out of court documents. The purpose of creating these culturally based schools was to attract white children into the Kansas City, Missouri School District. They live in the boundaries, but they go to other schools. It was a process of attracting them back. So it was not important at all to have anything in place as far as the school district, as far as the court was concerned, the federal court, that had anything to do with the history, culture, and contribution of African people. So I will get right into that and present this for your understanding. The first thing I want to do is just give a quick definition of what is Afrikan Centered Education. There's a bunch of them out there, but this is one I just heard recently, and it's centering ourselves and our students in the best of African culture. And by best, I mean there's things that our young people are associated with now that they call African culture, like violence, killing, gang activity. We're talking about the best of African culture, to examine and analyze information and to meet the needs and, very critically, solve problems in the African community. So in other words, if we've got an educational program system that's going on and we don't learn how to solve our own problems, then as Amos Wilson said, we're being educated into servitude. So that's what we were about the business of. This is what Afrikan Centered Education. I just want to use that for folks that have a little working definition. And I want to show you about what we did. And in our program, we had a mission statement. So, and I'll get to how it all came together, but the first thing I want to do is just hit some highlights so that your viewers would just kind of get a sense of what it is that we were doing and what we were able to get accomplished. So the mission of Afrikan Centered Education Collegium Campus, and it's right there, to create a world-renowned pre-K through 12th grade African-centered early college reform model, is to develop and enable scholars to become self-identifying, deep thinking, productive leaders for individual and societal transformation through culturally responsive and academic rigorous pathways of learning in a safe and nurturing environment. And you probably see some faces on there that you recognize, some of the African-centered scholars that we've worked with. But I want to call out, and I have to give homage to some of the key people involved in this, because NBUF's role was to agitate, take the resources that came from the Portland Baseline essays in relationship to our national context and bring those to bear, but also to provide a protective hedge around the people who actually worked in making sure it happened. The most important person of the team I'd have to give credit to is Mrs. Audrey Ballard. She was the dean of the program. She is where we started Afrikan Centered Education because we needed a principal who understood this. And her husband, Rupert Ballard, he was a principal in the Kansas City School District, took his family, Mrs. Ballard and their two children, to Liberia. And he just said, look, we're going to Liberia. We're going to train teachers in Liberia. And they stayed there for 2 years. She returned back to Kansas City, her and her husband. He was engaged in the school district. She was engaged in the school district. And I met her because the school that my daughters were attending was turning from being a traditional school to a Latin grammar magnet school, which means all the objects we had on the wall had to be of Latin. They had to, so it didn't have anything to do with our culture. Our principal was being sent to be trained on how to provide Latin grammar instruction. And the substitute principal we had was Mrs. Ballard. And Baba, this was in 1988. So during that time, NBUF had already decided that we were going to have Afrikan Centered Education as a national thrust for us. And we were thinking in those terms. We were already fighting with the school district. And then we met this beautiful sister here who had lived in Liberia for 2 years, teacher training, and who had Afrikan Centered concepts at her core. She was, and we call her the Queen Mother, the Dean of the campus, and she was our spiritual and instructional and intellectual leader. So she just celebrated her 86th birthday, and so we all praise to her and the work that she's done. The next person I have to give a shout out to is her son, Dr. Haru Ballard, who cut his teeth in ASCAC. Very, very active member of ASCAC. He was in Chicago, and we sought to bring him back from Chicago to come here and work with us in Afrikan Centered Education in Kansas City, and had to go through the federal court in order to do it. We were able to get it done. He wanted to be back here. He came back here, and he became the director of Afrikan Centered Education. And what you see here, ACECC, that stands for Afrikan Centered Education Collegium Campus. And there are many people I need to recognize, but I just want to say this is Dr. Jimmy Ballard. This is after a while, she and Baba Haru Ballard became husband and wife, but she was already working with us before he came back, and she became the principal of our middle school. And so you had this trio of family members right there who provided very strong academic and spiritual support for the campus. You cannot talk about Afrikan Centered Education in Kansas City without mentioning these three individuals. So for the folks who are out there, the instructional design, the Afrikan Centered campus is located within a unified, centralized campus with a multiplex of buildings. We had 3 buildings that we operated from, and the different grade spans from early childhood, pre-K, which was K3, that's 3-year-olds, through 12th grade, and is organized into a specific learning village. So just an aerial overview, this is what the campus looked like. We had 3 buildings. We had a high school building, an elementary school building, and then we had a 3rd building on the campus, which was our standalone 6th grade center. Now, Haru Ballard went in and actually did the calculations for how many square feet this campus stood on, and it stood on 40 acres. So we used to tell people we got 40 acres and some schools. You can imagine what happened when we were at a retreat. We had a campus retreat of the parents and staff, and he brought that PowerPoint up. And when he totaled up the numbers, and when it totaled up to 40, people just jumped up out of their seats. They couldn't contain themselves. It was the most spontaneous reaction that I've ever seen, that I had seen in a long time. People couldn't contain themselves because they understood the significance of the 40 acres. Here's campus offering. The lower campus, we had after school tutoring, pre-K, that's P3 and P4, early childhood. We had a Saturday school, which was connected with the Learning Center. We had an MHOTEP student council, LINK, which is an organization that provides after-school support. Our campus, when it was just the elementary school, was the first building in the school district that LINK became involved with. Student ambassadors, 6th grade campus, we had a Lego robotics team. We had tutoring, LINK, and student ambassadors. And on our high school, our middle school, we had Starlight on site, which means we had a very robust drama program. Daughters of the Rise, that was our rites of passage for the girls. We had intramural football for them. We had African dancing and drumming, choir, after school tutoring. In our upper campus, we had National Honor Society, early college program, because our students were getting dual college credit, chemistry team, physics team, pre-engineering program, and AP classes. And just a few more items on that. We had some offerings. We had volleyball, football, track, the kind of things we had that you would normally have. But we also had a council of Ma'at. which was how dispute resolutions were settled within the campus, and young people were trained in mod dispute resolution. And this is just a quick note. Our high school required more graduation credits that we put in place for ourselves in the state of Missouri, college preparatory programs, international baccalaureate program. We had, in order to graduate from our high school, you had to have 28 credits, which is more than all of those required, the others required. Just on a few achievements that we were able to have on the campus, and I'm just talking specifically about our last formation when we became a one complete campus. I'll talk a little bit about that before. We had pre-K, 1,100 students. Our second graduating class, because we started small, high school students of 62. In May 2012, 100% of them graduated, 94% were enrolled in higher education, $1.6 million of scholarship, interview course programs completed, and early college credits granted. I can talk fast, but I just want to get through part of this just so to set up on the things we really need to focus on. We had a first place awards winning marching band in high school, which I know if some of your folks are listening from down south, this is going to sound crazy, but it is very rare up here to have a marching band in high school. And we had one of the few, only 2 marching bands in the Kansas City School District, but ours was winning awards around the state. In terms of how we organize parents, we'd have an event, like, for example, a grandparents event, breakfast. It would be 300 grandparents that would show up. We had rites of passage, and our robotic team was an award-winning robotics team. And what do I mean by that? In the White House sends out invitations for young people to submit for science projects, and they invite only 40 schools from around the nation to come to Washington, D.C. and present. Our students in our middle school, 6th grade robotics team was the only school in the state of Missouri invited to participate in the national, to present in Washington, D.C. in the National Science Fair. And what did they do? Our robotics team, 6th grade students, invented a lunch pail that would disinfect your food inside the lunch pail by using UV. Submitted for a patent for it as well. And this is when they met President Obama, who came and toured to take a look at their display while they were in. 2 students we sent to represent the team in Washington, D.C. I want to also give a salute to the national scholars, because Dr. Shaka talked about the national scholars. When we got started, Dr. Hilliard, Dr. Wade Nobles, Dr. Jacob Carruthers were involved in our curriculum development and professional development from the beginning. And then down below, you see a number of other scholars who participated in the program as well. So it was a program that was embraced by our national scholars, and we became a nice practicum for ideas and training to take place as well. So now I want to move on to, I think, something that's really important, and that is, how do we do this? Well, Dr. Tashaka talked about this being a model for public school, and we were very intentional on going after and doing this in a public school environment. And understand, we talked about the role of IMBA, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a role of what was going on in Kansas City. Kansas City School District, I want to look at the period from 1898 when it started up into 2008 to talk about some important things that took place. From 1968 to 1978 is when the desegregation work was being done. And I think Barbara Dixon's grandmother was actually interviewed by the NAACP researchers who were out gathering information about what segregation was like in Kansas City. It's during this period from 78 to about 2001, is when the district implemented its desegregation program. And in so doing, it was, I think the district spent over $2 billion, which came from the state of Missouri. And the state of Missouri, it caused great deal of hostility between Kansas City, St. Louis, and the state of Missouri about the amount of money that the federal judge said would have to be paid in taxes to support these schools, because the schools had gotten so bad that they said when it rained outside, it poured inside in the buildings on our children. And so the DSEG case, this guy you see here, Arthur Benson, was the plaintiff's attorney, and he took the Jenkins case on and was able to secure these resources for the school district. Extensively because our students had been discriminated against doing segregation, as they call it, but it turned out to be the greatest economic boom for white businesses in Kansas City that you'd ever seen on the backs of our children. Also, Arthur Benson became a school board member later on in his career, and he won on a write-in vote. Only 379 people in his district actually even voted. That's how things deteriorated. So I just want to say something real quick. We wound up being asked to go consolidate the Afrikan Centered schools, which were in 3 different campuses at that time, into one location. And we were asked by the school board president to move over to the southeast campus, the one I just showed you all the aerial view over. And there was a lot of problems there. We initially did not want to go there. There was issues with fights and fires and police calls. Bobby Dixon and I live in the community where the Southeast High School campus is, and I can tell you, you could come home at 11 o'clock in the morning, and students be running up and down the street, not even in school, police cars chasing them. It was a mess. In fact, people living next to the school were selling their houses and couldn't sell them. They had signs up because the building was just out of control. One of the things that was interesting, we were there for 1 year. After we told the school district we would take on the campus, and we gave them some conditions which the district met. And after a year, we had a report from the Kansas City Police Department. They came in and they said the year before you all got here, we had 835 calls from the police department about issues happening at this campus. We said, wow, we didn't know that. And we said, well, how many did you get this year? They said 0. So that was the impact that we were having in the community itself, not only in the school, but in the community, because we were doing some education. So historically, it was 1986 that NBUF adopted the Portland Baseline Essays, and I think it was 1986, to resolve to implement same in public schools with a sizable African population. But it was in November 1986 that Casey Buck began to join several magnet school planning committees. So Dr. Shaka, you asked, how do we do it? When NBUF, we decided that before we were able to get what we wanted, we had to go and join these planning committees for all these other magnet schools and force the issue of Afrikan Centered Education. So we spread out. We had 7 or 8 different school committees we joined, bringing the issue on the table. And by and large, the Black parents there who were part of those committees were very much behind it, because they were experiencing a lot of the things that many of us were experiencing about our kids being locked out. In 1987, NBUF joined with other activist coalitions. We joined and formed a coalition called the Coalition of Education and Economic Justice. And that's when we petitioned the federal court to include the Portland Baseline Essays in all of the magnet schools. Strategic. We did that just to create pressure. Have the court to tell us that we could not include the information in the history and culture of our people to be used in these magnets. Ostensibly, they were there just to attract white students. So a settlement was made. And the settlement was Dr. George Garcia. Superintendent, what do you want? There was 3 elementary schools that are non-magnet that we can make Afrikan Centered. And so our strategy worked, and that's what happened. The district gave up 3 elementary, and we started building the Afrikan Centered program from those 3 elementary schools. Parents and activists in 1989 came together to formulate the instructional and philosophical framework for Afrikan Centered Education at J.S. Chick School. J.S. Chick School became so successful, yet it was not a magnet school, so it did not get all the funding, outperformed the rest of the magnet schools so well that it attracted attention of a number of scholars. Even Dr. Asa Hilliard wrote about it in one of his books. He came down and met us and very supportive of us. Later on, when in 1995, when the district tried to make all the remaining schools Afrikan Centered, all the remaining schools charter schools, and they wanted to have an entire charter district, we fought that, because that would have taken our 3 Afrikan Centered schools and made them international studies schools. And in 1995, the judge agreed with us, and he made it ordered that Stanford B. Ladd School become Afrikan Centered as a charter school, as a magnet school. So Stanford B. Ladd became the first court-ordered Afrikan Centered school in the country, and that was one of our schools. Here's something that's quite interesting as well in our overview. Between 1991 and 2010, in order to protect the advances of the Afrikan Centered Education movement, NBUF KC members had to run and had been selected and elected to the Kansas City School Board. What you see here before you are a list of people who ran, and some got elected and served on the Kansas City School Board, NBUF members. So Marilyn Simmons was our first one, and she's now an ancestor. Lee Barnes, who was an NBUF member who got elected to the school board, who's now a city council member. Michael Bird got elected at large. Claude Harris, Ray Wilson, and Kokithia Hill, and Dr. Linwood Tahi. That's Dr. Tahi standing in front, and he was my partner in this and that. He and I worked together to get the information, the Portland baseline essay, into Kansas City. Work directly to do that and get it into the high school. And we got, he was also the vice chair of the board of Afrikan Centered Education Task Force. Moving through here now, we did the struggle back and forth, having our 3 schools fighting the magnet program to overtake them. So in the year 2000, the expansion of our program, we expanded into a middle school. We expanded J.S. Chick by adding grades there with the goal of going into a middle school. And in 2001, we moved our 6th and 7th graders into the John Henry Clark Middle School building. Now, a lot of folks asked, you mean tell me you had a school building named after Dr. John Henry Clark? It was probably the first one in the country. And in fact, we had support from brothers and sisters out of New York City to make that happen. It was named by the community, Dr. John Henry Clark, over the wishes of the school board. And in 2008, after all of those challenges, we were able to strike a deal to move all of our schools into one campus. So that happened in 2008. And I just wanted to give folks some information on that. When we entered into this contract with the school district, to bring all of our schools to one campus, to the Southeast campus, we entered into a 5-year contract to make that happen. And we created the Afrikan Centered Education Task Force, Inc., or SETI, as the board to hold that contract. So we had and we operated as a contract school. And what that meant was that the school district would give us an allotment per pupil of $8,500, and we were in charge of everything: hiring teachers, hiring administrators, contracts with all of the vendors. They leased the 3 buildings to us for $1 a year, and we were responsible again for all staffing. And that was crucial because it finally gave us control of the school and the operation. So it's important to understand what that meant. That meant we were responsible for transportation services, food services, maintenance, janitorial, books and instruction, trash removal. That was our responsibility. So we went from being an advocate organization to actually being a business, to run the institution. And that is a transformation that Dr. Shaka, you and I talked about before. It's kind of like being a guerrilla and struggling out there in the community and then becoming the administration at that time or the government. So we went through those transitions, but I'm very proud to say that to the highest extent possible, those services, transportation, food services, maintenance, janitorial, we did those contracts with Black-owned businesses. So that was the other opportunity that gave us. And then kind of getting towards the end of this now, other contributions that we made to the movement. In December of 2011, we published a curriculum model that included pre-K through 12 curriculum, a professional development model, a site-based management model, and a character development model. This is what we were able to contribute and put together with the help of the scholars in the community. And I'm talking fast, but I just want to say that this was a tremendously focused attention of being able to control and manage a school within the school district that was a public school with resources to have a maximum impact and then create a model for others to do this. So Dr. Ober, that's I'm not at the end of it, but that's at the point that I just wanted to have a little break. My next point I'll go into is the fall. What happened and why did the program itself, or SETI, why did it fall? So I'm going to stop right there and see if you had any questions before I go further.
you've covered the bulk of this, and what you've covered is so much, and the achievements are so significant. And I guess one question I have is, when you were organizing the base to move the board to this, and that base that enabled you to control this, what did you do to do that? I mean, what were some of the constituent elements of the base that enabled you to get this victory from the community?
Very good point. When we saw the opportunity, and the opportunity before us was that the district could not tell us it wasn't putting in place culturally based programs. It was doing so. We saw that for the adjudicated victims, again, this was a court order of slavery and segregation, when they put these cultural programs in place, culturally based schools, Greek, French, Spanish, all of that, none reflected us. We knew we had an opportunity. And we tried petitioning directly to the board. That did not work. So what we did was to spread out among NBUF and to, first of all, put a coalition together with other affected folks. That's when we created the Coalition for Education and Economic Justice. And we put our people on various school panels. So each school, their schools had planning panels that were planning for the curriculum that would convert them to magnet schools. We had people spread out on those panels, and we were able to take information that we had from the Portland baseline essays with us to those panels to let parents know that there is a better way, that there is an opportunity here for us to be included in this thing, and we got into vigorous debates and discussion. So that gave us an opportunity to engage with parents right there where they were at their school buildings, deal with the concerns that they had. We were able then to pull that together in a collective force to come back to the school board and say, this is what our community is asking for and demanding. And so we were able to mobilize from that base. But the other thing that helped us very well is while we were doing this mobilization, we had already put in place what we had from the first elementary school, from Chick School, because we didn't need a court order for that. We didn't need anything for that. That was a traditional school. We had Mrs. Ballard. She became the principal over there. And Queen Mother Ballard, when she got over there, we got with her and she immediately started implementing. So we had a model that we could point out to people. It's happening right here in the district. It needs to be spread further. Parents would see that, community members would see that, they would go for it. But I'll be honest with you, it wasn't universally supported. And what I mean by that is the plaintiff's attorney, Arthur Benson, went on record in the Kansas City Star, and he said Afrikan Centered Education is anti-intellectual. The NAACP picked up on that, and then they criticized NBUF in our efforts and said that we are hurting the desegregated attractiveness of the Kansas City School District. That was a mindset. So you had that aspect going there, and you had what we were doing. And Arthur Benson went to court to stop us, the plaintiff's attorney, to stop us from doing that. And it's amazing how these things work. Sometimes when your enemy publicly goes out to do things to stop you, it even raises more attention about what you're doing. And more folks came to our support because he was challenging us on something so fundamental. It was as if he was challenging on us for trying to advocate for being human. I mean, folks rallied to our position. So a combination of being strategic about where we placed our people, again, working on planning committees for various schools, the resources we were able to bring to the table from the Portland baseline essays, having JS Chick as our first school we did that one without permission within the district where we were developing it and folks would come see it, and being under attack and then being able to deflect those blows in ways that allow us to focus attention on what we wanted and rally folks to our support. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and that's some real good community organizing, because you saw an opportunity, you took advantage of it, you exploited it, and then you used the administrative apparatus that they had set up to push your position and get some policy in place. The other question is, I know you had a person, I think you referred to a couple who served on the Board of Education,
Yes.
advocated your position. What role did they play in helping you get policy through and keeping your thing going?
Well, the folks we had on the board, I'll see if I can pull them. Well, I'll just go back. They were crucial and key. Marilyn Simmons, first of all, it was tough to get her elected because she was coming from a district that had a majority white population. We had to do a lot of organizing just to get her elected. But we were able to not only get her elected and support her while she was on the school board, she eventually became board president. And when she became board president, she was able at that point to have significant influence over the superintendent and the administration to support our initiative. But not only that, when she became board president, coincidentally, 2 board members dropped off the school board. And at the time that happened, it was the power of the school board to just appoint new school board members. You didn't have to have an election. So Marilyn she appointed one more NBUF member and then one of our allies to the school board. It was such an issue that the state of Missouri changed the rules that relate to how school board members get replaced simply because of what we did. So Marilyn was fearless when it came down to standing up for our issues in African Centered Education. I mean, she was absolutely fearless, and she created space for other people to come on and be supportive. And in so doing, they were able to pick a new superintendent, and they picked a brother by the name of Henry Williams. Now, Hank Williams came in as our new superintendent. He was 100% behind African Centered Education. In fact, his history is this. He went to Fayetteville State, which is a historic black college in North Carolina. The reason he went to Fayetteville State was that he lived in New York, in Brooklyn, and met Minister Malcolm X. When things went down, Minister Malcolm told him, "You need to get out of here and go to college." He went to Fayetteville State. He didn't tell us that when he first got here. It was after he was here and they selected him and he got close to us that he brought out that history. So we said, "Oh, brother, you was meant to be here with us." So the board was able to not only to support us from the outside, but also to control policy and administrators at the superintendent level who would come in and would be supportive. It took years to get all that to happen, but that's how our board members did that. Lee Barnes came onto the board, Michael Bird came onto the board, Claude Harris came on the board, and they all did the same thing. So they were extremely instrumental. We would not have been able to do this without them. And what you'll see later is once we lost our ability to have our allies on the board, everything changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is giving an example of how you wield power in the Black community and moving from your own base in the community into institutions that are set up to miseducate you. And it should be pointed out, the biggest budget in most cities is the public school budget. So when you go after that, you're going after real power. And so the way you did it on multiple levels, including the policymaking level, and you demonstrated something else, that you had an advocate that you got elected representing NBUF and representing your interests. And then through various processes, when she becomes board president, when some people resign, you're able to appoint others. But the key point is you were able to do this without having a majority control of the board. And a lot of us think that that's what policy power is. No, it's not. You know what I mean? First of all, it's a minority of people that run this country. But when it comes to wielding power, it's a question of how you organize and the strategic way in which you move. So this was absolutely brilliant. And I hope not only people that watching this now, that watch this, but over time will get this, because this is one of the institutions that mess our people up more than anything, that we've got to intervene in and exercise control over. And the thought that you can't is what prevents you from doing it. But then being able to do the various things that you did. It's absolutely brilliant. You know what I
And,
mean?
I, and if I can add to that, first of all, your point is so very well taken. And it does not mean that people are not going to come after you. In
Right.
fact, a school board member came after us. Her name was Alma Ward. She saw what we were doing. She did not like it. Originally, we supported her for school board, but she got on there and she got massaged by the white power structure. She went to the federal monitor and said NBUF is a African separatist organization and is here trying to take over the school district, and we should be pushed out of the school district. She went to the federal monitor and said that. And when she did that, the press picked up on it and said, NBUF, this African, Pan-African separatist organization is trying to take it. Basically, they blew all the dog whistles. But this is what happened. Michael Berg, who was on the school board, and Lee Barnes, who were on the school board at that time, both started the school board meetings, and they had all the press in there. And Lee Barnes started a school board meeting, said, "My name is Lee Barnes, as you know, and I'm a proud member of the National Black United Front. And I'm here to support the people of our community, and I don't run away from that." Went to Michael Berg. He said the exact same thing. Our people learn that you don't have to run from who you are just because some confused person blows the dog whistle for the folks to come in on you. And the community supported it. And so it didn't go anywhere. Now, we were brought in before the federal monitor, and they tried to rake us over the coals. We said, look, we are here for one reason. Our children deserve to have an education that's going to help benefit our community. You can't tell me that we can't demand that. So, Brother Oba, it comes down to standing on those principles, which our people did. We could not have done that if the community did not support us, but they organized and got us to that level. And I just want to say one more thing about this, because this is really important. This was being done in an environment where the federal court ran the school district, and it had its own monitoring committee that the board had to answer to. And in that environment, when all of that was going on, and we were called up and brought in before the federal monitor, a court hearing was held to end the court control of the school district. And in that court hearing, one of our members, Donna Jackson, who was a parent, was asked to testify. She was on the witness stand. And she said to the judge, she said, "Judge, I don't understand this. How is it that our children can be in a school district where all these $2 billion being spent to bring education up? We demand quality education. We demand to be educated, have a quality education. Why is it that we're being fought by the plaintiff's attorney?" And Judge Russell Clark turned to her and looked at her and said to you, "Ma'am, I am so sorry. But in America, you don't have a constitutional right to a quality education." He says, "You only have a constitutional right to be educated in a desegregated environment." What that said to us is that this is not a constitutional issue. Nobody cares if African people get a quality education in America. There's no law that says it has to happen. If it has to happen, we have to make that happen. And so I brought that up to give your listeners and viewers a context for the environment that we were functioning in. And it could not have been done without some that type of level of community organizing from the board level all the way down to the parent level. And we had what we call parent universities that every other week on our main campus, and when we were spread out campus, the parent meetings would take place where parents would organize on how to move the agenda forward. That's what was going on. And it culminated in something that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but I just wanted to stop here and give you the opportunity for your next question.
No, I think that's it. I've got my questions.
Okay.
And main thing I'd stress is this: 22 years of wielding power the way you did and producing results for Black kids. This is the big deal. And what we need to do is understand the importance of doing this across the country. But yeah, go to the next point.
So now we're going into some lessons learned. And this is the fall of a city, because we operated control of that campus. And I want to let folks know that we started off with a budget of close to $8 million. And, that's kind of hard even for me right now to wrap my head around it. We were able to fight with the school district for all these years and then have them break out an $8 million budget for us to run our campus on a contract where we managed all the resources. That was our annual budget. And the fall of a city the fall of a city is a really important thing, because leading up to this was this. Kansas City School District was in a position where it wanted to close, where the board wanted to close 1/2 of all the school buildings in the entire district. It was unprecedented. And this was due to, after spending almost $3 billion in renovation and having all these initiatives trying to attract white students back to the school district, it didn't happen. And so they found themselves with new buildings that they were looking to close, as well as renovated. All the buildings have been renovated. They were looking to close. And after we had a deal in place for a 5-year agreement, because we went through a lot of superintendents, a superintendent by the name of John Covington now was in place. And Covington came in he was a shutdown artist. His job was to come in and cut the budget to right-size the school district. And so what he did was approach all of the schools, school organizations, parent advisory groups, and everybody, and said, this is what we're going to do. Put out a list of schools that they were going to shut down. And they were his plan was to take us from our 3-building configuration down into 1 high school building. So we had problems with that. The one practical problem we had with it was this. We have 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. They can't walk up the same flight of stairs as an adult. Now, I'm an engineer, and if there are architects out there listening, you know this. A riser on an adult stair is 6 inches. A riser on a child stair is usually about 3. Now, and the cafeteria was on the 4th floor. It just didn't make any practical sense for us to do that. And so we opposed his right-sizing program. And in so doing, opposing his right-sizing program is when all of the trouble started. Now, here's one of the things that you all probably know. The white business power structure is tied in with public education, particularly one that had a $3 billion spend over that time span. Right. And they were looking to cut costs, keep this thing rolling the way they wanted. And we were opposing that. And our opposition was part and parcel to parent oppositions all over the school district. The superintendent, because of community support, was not able to crunch us down into the 1-building plan that he wanted. And so he vowed to make us pay. And so right here we say that he opposed the superintendent's 2009 school closing plan, and he and his administration said they want to make us pay for that. Our next contract year came up 2010, and in that 2010-year contract, they cut our budget by $1 million. Then the one that came up the next year after that, they cut it by another $1 million, and we just said we were not going to sign the contract. The board met with us in a closed session and said, look, we know what the deal is. We know this is not right. Just school's getting ready to start, sign a contract, and we will fix it by an MOU. Covington resigns and moves to Detroit to become the Detroit Public School shutdown guy. They're shutting down the schools in Detroit. And the board, when we tried to get with them hey, we signed a contract, we're operating with $2 million less, you said you're going to fix it, they would say they were too busy. They had to fix this. And so with that, our parents filed a lawsuit against the school district to get them to honor the contract, go and put in what it was supposed to be in place, because we were operating at a $2 million deficit with just less than an $8 million budget. That's a significant reduction. And so a new superintendent came in. His name is Stephen Green. And they put together the school board. Now Marilyn Simmons, who was no longer president, she was still on the board, but her health was failing her. The political organization in Kansas City, Freedom Incorporated, which is the Black political organization that gets folks elected, NBUF had a pact with them and an agreement with them that we would spearhead the school board candidates, and Freedom would handle everything else. They got new leadership in, and then they challenged us. They broke the contract, the deal that they had with NBUF, and they wanted to put some different people in on the school board. So you can see some of the things that are happening here. So you had the media pressuring the school board to let the superintendent do his thing. You had Marilyn Simmons getting sick, and then our other board member had gone off the board, new people coming in. You had a superintendent had a grudge against us going out that was able to pass that grudge over to the next superintendent. And you had the Black political organization now reneging on an agreement they had with NBUF to let NBUF be responsible for the school board folks. And they ran folks against our folks, which split up the community, and the people that we wanted to get on did not get on. So in that environment is when Stephen Green told us he wasn't going to renew our contract. And it got worse, because not only did he say he wasn't going to renew our contract, and we began to resist against that, he went public and said that the Afrikan Centered Education Task Force, Inc., he alleged that there was $8 million misappropriated or missing. Now, brother and sister, I want you to understand what that means when somebody stands up and say $8 million is missing. It's like having a speed dial to the FBI. It means that you're automatically under scrutiny and that people are being set up to go to jail. This is a superintendent of schools saying that the ASETI, which is the governing board for the Afrikan Centered campus, had $8 million missing out of a $7.6 million budget, okay, which had been cut by $1 million. We immediately responded to that with our financial records with a financial independent audit, which said all of that wasn't true. And then there was so much community pushback on him going after the Afrikan Centered Education that Stephen Green instituted another strategy. He told the community, we're not getting rid of Afrikan Centered Education, because there's no way that was going to fly. We just want to get rid of the people who advocate and support Afrikan Centered Education, the founders of it, the brain trust behind it, and we, the district, is going to take it over. But people say, you don't know anything about Afrikan Centered Education. And he says, I know a guy who does. His guy was Dr. Malefi Asante, who had a relationship with his son, and Chris Wiggins, who was a consultant who ran an Afrikan Centered school in Philadelphia. This is the part that's very, very painful, Dr. Deshaka, to talk about even now. Because what happened is once it was identified by the superintendent that he was going to have us have a SETI removed, keep an Afrikan Centered school, but bring in someone like Malefi Asante to run the program, and Chris Wiggins to run the program, it was a bait and switch with the Afrikan Centered community. But we figured we had a strategy for that. We reached out to the scholars, the elders in the community. We talked with, we reached out to Dr. Conrad Burrell. We reached out to Maulana Karinga, who knows Malefi Asante very well. And Dr. Karinga spent time with us, counseling us about how to approach Dr. Malefi Asante about what was going on. He told us, reach out to him, talk to him, let him know what's going on so that he won't participate in this. We did. And what you see on here is some documentation, some dates and times of conversations that took place between us and him. His first response to us was that, wait a minute, they're just using my name. I don't know anything about this. I'm on my way to France. When I get back, I'm going to give you guys a call. We can talk. We can get this situated, squared away. We even had our Queen Mother reach out to Mother Chris to talk to her, Queen Mother to Queen Mother, campus to campus, and say, look, let's not be involved in this, and explain all of that to her. But long story short, it was to no avail. They decided that when Malefi Asante came back, we couldn't get a hold of him again after that. And we had other scholars that reach out to him through ASCAC. who Mario Beatty and other folks reached out to try to figure out what was going on, and ultimately, the school district, the parents, we sued the school district. We went to court. We were unsuccessful in the suit. The district decided to just take the money back, take over the campus, and they brought the team of Chris Wiggins, Malefi Asante, and Insight, another organization, to Kansas City to meet with parents to try to let them know that everything is going to be fine. Well, we went from a situation where we tried to negotiate, we tried using the principles of Ma'at, we tried talking to the folks who were in the African Centered community to let them know, why would you have one African Centered group, particularly someone at the statue of Malefi Asante, be purposely used to destroy an African Centered school initiative? Why would you do that? We tried that. We reached out to the scholars. Dr. Lynn Tahi, who was our vice chair of our board and an NBUF member, wrote an open letter to the scholars, which went around the country asking the same question to get Malefi Asante to back off of this. That didn't happen. So when they came to Kansas City, they asked to meet with us, and we told them at that point, we can't meet with you. We're at war. We have to protect this. You all had an opportunity and not to make this happen, and you did it. And so I will just summarize by saying this. Brother Spark Bookhart on May did speak directly with Malefi Asante, had conversations with him. So we did speak with them. His people came anyway, and people have asked us, is this true? They said, are you all making this up? But I can tell you, we even have a copy of the contract that the school district had with Dr. Malefi Asante, with his signature on it, agreeing to come in here. And as you can see, he signed it on September of 2012. We have the scope of services on it, and the contract was for $28,000. James Brown said it well. He said, sold me out for chicken change. The other point on that was the other group had a $150,000 contract to come in. Brothers and sisters, what it did was something that we see all the time. You don't have to be right when you go on attack, when you have power. You just need to spread confusion. Confusion was spread. A substitute was brought in. The substitute that was brought in were people from the African Centered community that knew full well what they were getting into. And they came in for the money. And when that happened, the district was able to take the campus back, and it caused tremendous repercussions. And so the repercussions were this: Black vendors didn't get paid. Teachers didn't get paid. It was an enormous tragedy that took place. We were able to raise our own money to make sure we got people paid their last paycheck. It was a disaster. All of that is a lesson learned. And here are the lessons we learned from it. One, public education is a strategy, and we should work to control the schools that our children attend as a strategy. Ultimately, it can't be what we rely on. We still have to have our Saturday schools like the W.E.B, the Bois Learning Center. We still have to make maximum utilization of the resources we have that we own and control. But we have to be in here within these public school spaces fighting. We have to be vigilant on the side as it relates to elected officials. We've got to keep our people in place. And we got to remind ourselves that nobody is coming to save us. There is no superintendent that's going to come and save us. Like that, there was a movie put out called Waiting for Superman or Looking for Superman or something by Jeffrey Canada. There is no superintendent. It's us. The community is our people that's going to do this. And we've got the tools and resources to do it. We don't have to worry about can we educate our children. We already know we can do that. What we have to do is fight the forces that see our children and our people being educated as a tactical strategic threat to their interests. And sometimes our own people with their mental conditioning can become pawns in that. And it happened all the way down the line. So where we are right now, and this is my last slide. Where we are right now is in the process. It's been 10 years since this happened, and we're in the process of still now making a push for reparative justice, so that we do have some things we're working out and working with the current superintendent to try to get reparative justice. And I do want to close by saying this. African Centered Education is still going on in Kansas City School District. It did not stop. It got watered way down, but eventually our people who we worked with, our administrators, crept back, and teachers crept back into the district program and began to reinstitute what it is that we worked on without the support of the downtown administration, clandestinely, but they began to make it work. And now we're getting calls from the parents that are there now saying, you got to come back. It's time for us to get community behind us again and make this run. That's the end of my presentation.
Yeah, I knew about this end because I was getting reports from Conrad and then later from you on what actually happened. And I see some people here are surprised, as they should be, that someone of Molefi Asante's stature would play this kind of role. And this speaks also to the fact that if you're talking about what Black Studies means at the university or African Centered Studies means at the university level, it's determined by what's the relationship of those departments to the community. And it's really determined by who are they loyal to. And I pointed out that among the African Centered scholars, I'm the only one that's a revolutionary. Some will call themselves that, they're not. And that's okay. Asa Hilliard was not a revolutionary. It's okay. He was progressive, and he'd never do anything like this. You know what I mean? And they were producing stuff that was good for the Black community. And it was more radical than they realized. You know, so you don't have to be a revolutionary to do this. And I don't care what amount of money you got. It doesn't justify it. $28,000? Give me a break. You hear me? So
what I'd like to do now that you've raised that point, because we don't talk about this publicly, and since this has happened, Molefi Asante has been publicly challenged on this. It happened in Houston, Texas, when he was down at Brother Kofi. This is at Texas Southern. He spoke, and Brother Kofi got up and challenged him on this. And what he said was that the reason what he heard was that we stole money. No, of course, you don't steal money and not go to jail stealing public dollars in America. There was never even an indictment on that, and none of that ever happened. The school board in July following year acknowledged that nothing was ever stolen. I mean, they said it publicly in the Kansas City Star. But I want to do something, if I could, just for folks who, they're rightfully so, would be concerned that, is this just hyperbole? Well, you should be seeing my screen now. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is, if you're looking at this contract, this is the contract between the school district, and I'm just going to show you a couple of things on it. This is the contract between the school district and Dr. Molefi Asante. There it is. And just so that everybody understands, I'm telling the truth, there's his signature to the contract. There's the date.
Can you put this up on the screen?
Yes, I'm going to
put it up on the screen.
Let me make sure I put it up on the screen here. Let me go back. I'm going to do the share process over again. Let me know if you can see it.
I see it on the bottom. I don't see it coming up.
Okay, let me see if I can. If you see it on the bottom there, this might be the best that I can do with it, because it's not like a PowerPoint, so it's a little harder to show.
Yeah.
But this is the contract. There's his signature, and he did come.
There it is.
There it is. There. So there's his signature on the contract, and just so that everybody understand that brother ain't making this up, we can get to the top of the contract. There it is, a contract between the school district and Malefi Asante, and at the bottom there is his signature. He did commit to this. It's a $28,000 contract. He did do some training. Family, I'll just say this: it would have been very, very difficult for the school district superintendent to pull this off without having someone like Dr. Malefi Asante that he could tell the community that Afrikan Centered Education is going to go forward. We don't need the folks from Massetti that started this. It would have been almost impossible. So his role was essential, pivotal, and again, that's now you know what I mean when I said following James Brown. That was it. It was chicken shit, but the damage was enormous. I just want to end with that and say that that's what happened. I think all of it is a lesson learned for us. All of it is important. And we can get a lot out of this going forward. But the most important point is that Afrikan Centered Education still went forward. We were successful enough to establish it enough in the minds of our people in Kansas City that they demanded it, even though we went through the tragedy of losing control of it.
Yeah, and I would say that you had a tremendous success there, 22 years of it. And I know that you didn't go through all the battles that you had, because when you affect any kind of education in the Black community, particularly at the public school level, there are a couple of things that the people in power see. One is you're affecting money and budgets. So that's money that doesn't go into their pocket. And even though, as you pointed out to me, your amount of money allocated per pupil was lower than what the school district normally provides for students, you still impacted that. So you had corporate enemies from the beginning.
Yes.
That's a number one. And so in any battle, we're going to have every kind of dirty thing done to try and sustain their power. And so this is what they pulled out of the trick bag this time. But there's always going to be stuff coming out of the bag. The key point is you succeeded for 22 years, and it's a model for what Blacks can do around the country. Doesn't mean you're going to copy exactly what Kansas City did, because they took advantage of their situation. You got to take, as Brother Leon said earlier, make do with the hand that's dealt you. And that hand, you start with that hand, and then you begin to make your own moves. So this is the key point here, and shame on anybody who would take a position based on money on anything, betraying our own community's interests. And Malefi has provided, his department has provided 3 faculty for our department, one of whom was my replacement, who's a very good person. So the department has done some good work. But the fact of the matter is, if you can't apply what you do in the classroom to what people are doing in the community, that negates what you stand for. That's bad news. Bad news any kind of way. And I knew this was coming up, and tough stuff. Somebody doesn't like hearing this. This is a fact. And what I can say is, INBA, this is something we had in our Constitution. When we formed the organization in 1980, the retreat that we had in Chicago, one of the things that I put in the National Constitution was INBUF would be economically self-reliant. Maulana Karinga said, interdependence is a rule throughout the world. I said independence will be the rule with INBUF. Now here's the point. INBUF as an organization has never received money for anything we've done. And the people in it have been in it for one reason. By the way, Gaddafi was giving out millions of dollars. And because we had this provision, and then I went on the warpath, but INBUF wasn't going to take it anyway. I said, we definitely ain't taking this money. Gaddafi is about as unpredictable as the weather. You know what I mean? For example, he gave the Nation of Islam money and then comes on television during the Nation of Islam Savior's Day and tells them that they need to have some kind of movement in this country to replace the power of this country. I mean, he's calling for some kind of revolutionary movement of blacks. You know, nation could withstand that. NBUF couldn't have. You know what I mean? Because I think the system said, well, that ain't going to happen, blah, blah. So the key point is this organization with integrity. And this organization, I know Ajamu was like head person. I know he didn't get a dime for the whole time they were running the program. Neither did any NBUF people. He didn't discuss the fact that NBUF's role in this was to protect the program. He just passed over that without pay. That's also how you protect something, because nobody owns you. So I take my hat off to the work that you all have done. And it's a shame that this happened. But the fact of the matter is, you got a template for how you can do this. People need to pick it up. And this is why we're doing this show. A lot of people take these shows as good information. Yeah, it's good information. But it's also an example of how you do something in your own community. Take this information and apply it so that you can build something that will be of help to your people. In this case, our children. So y'all did a wonderful job. And I hope people got some lessons from this. And I want to thank both of you. Proud of both of you, Leon and Ajamu, and all the people that work with you that have made this happen. There are a few comments here. One is from Worley Smith, and the comment is, young teachers today are reluctant to volunteer for after-school programs. And so the question here was, are there ways for us to do that now? That's basically the question. So, Leon, you got some suggestions for today. They're suggesting that you could do it then, but it's hard to do it now. What's your response to that? Getting volunteers to work in these schools.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Only thing I can say, you have to assess the community in terms of what you have to work with and go from there. You know, it's not as easy now as it was then.
But I would add this, that just as it's only a minority that did it then, it's only a minority that's going to do it now. You know what I mean? And the fact of the matter is, maybe it is a little harder for some, but then if you get to the people who have consciousness, they'll do it now. You know what I mean? You got.
Well, I often say you need three things. You need commitment, consciousness, and concern. You need to have concern, commitment, and consciousness. And this generation coming up now, I'm not saying they're not there, but do we know them?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that's a part of an organizer's job, because you used your contacts in the corporate world, but you use them wherever you're coming from. You know what I mean? And so it's a question of putting out what you're doing, and bees, make honey. And, people are attracted to things that, they're oriented towards. And the main thing I would say to the person that made the comment is, if you think you can't get them, you won't get them. But if you think you can, you'll find them. And this goes back to the definition of power. Power is your thoughts, and it shapes who you are. And so if you think you can find them, you'll find them. It won't be easy. That's the whole point. You won't get 1 million. That's another point. But you'll get them. You hear me? That's a key point. Lao Tzu, a question for both Dixon and Webster. Have you developed strategies for combating the excessive amount of medication as a means of controlling the behavior of our students?
That one came up for us. And I just want to make a couple of points in regards to that, something I wished I had said, that our schools performed very, very well, but we didn't handpick the students. We took all that came. I think our turnaround rate was a little less than 2%. Some schools in the district, they were cherry picking. Like they would cherry pick, and you have to meet a certain grade point average or something. But that wasn't us. So we would wind up with a number of students who were coming from schools that they weren't successful at or had other issues. And so it was important for us to make sure our staff understood the psychosocial dynamics of our community so that they wouldn't try to medicate just because they didn't want to spend time dealing with those young persons. And our staff, our administrators watched that very closely. So although we didn't have alternative medication, if you will, our goal was to make sure that those who were making the recommendations were culturally sensitive to what was going on so that they would not do what typically happens, particularly with our boys. You get in a situation where they won't sit down, you want to get them medicated. Well, that was something that we fought against tooth and nail. And we had people who were monitoring that. And I just want to tell a real quick story. We had a young man who was, I'll never forget this. I was at the elementary building and I went to see Mrs. Ballard for something. So we were in the elementary office there. And a young man was in there and he was just fidgeting, sitting in his chair, and he was just fidgeting. And one of the administrators from the district came in and said, well, this young man's supposed to be in class? And the vice principal said, well, he is, but I'm going to be working with him because he's not having a good day. And the administrator said, well, shouldn't he be reading right now? And she said, oh, yeah. And she said, young man, get that book and then read for this person. So here, this young man was in the first grade. He took a book off the shelf. When he finished reading, the administrator was just shocked, like, oh, wait a minute, he can read? He can read? Because the expectation is that our young people are not performing. And so therefore, if they're moving around too much, they need medication. No, he was, the teacher knew that he was just not having a good day. And the vice principal said, I'll take him for his time period. That's how we dealt with those issues, not send them out for medication immediately because we don't want to be bothered with them.
And young Black males especially, according to whites, are hyperactive. They're not hyperactive, they're active. And the main way that you teach Blacks a lot is through motion, especially younger Blacks, not just sitting them in a chair and lecturing to them. And that's also a part of learning through doing. That's our culture. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's crucial. Good question and good answer. Loud to Zoo, how can we duplicate the Saturday school? Jeez, quit moving it. I just had a question here. How can we duplicate the Saturday School and Learning Center in Michigan as part of the cultural center we're in the process of establishing? Any suggestions?
Yeah. First of all, you need what I would say two things. When it comes to the subject matter, you need somebody who knows the subject matter. But just because you like kids and want to work with kids and concerned about kids, that's fine. But if you don't know math, you can't teach it. So you need somebody who knows the subject matter and who has the consciousness to go along with it. Now you have to assess your community and see who in your community has those qualifications or who's the best person with those qualifications. And you move from there. And then like when Ajamu was talking, I was thinking, he mentioned last school and they was going to have a math test. And so like one of the teachers told the principals to work with me. So I went over there and I said, I work with you on one condition. You let me do it my way. So she did. So long story short, I worked with them for about 2 or 3 months. And then when they took the test, they told the teacher that, I mean, they had never seen anybody make that much progress. So she swore they must have cheated. And I told the teacher, said, have them talk to me. You know, which they never did, you know, because they wasn't going to argue with me because I'd go win the argument anyway, you know. But see, like it should be pointed out with respect to teaching math, you can be truly outstanding at computation and not be good at math at all. But see, if you don't understand that, how you going to relate that and work with your kids in that regard? And most of the teachers don't. And the example I use to illustrate that point, and Ajamu can deal with this because he used to teach fractions. When you teach, when when schools or teachers teach fractions and it comes to dividing fractions, they take them just to take the denominator and flip it and multiply it. But they never tell the kids why you do that. And that's where the education comes in. Just don't do it because somebody said do it. Because I asked the kid one time, I said, why you do? He said, that's what my teacher said do. So I opened up the window, I said, go jump out the window. So you don't do that. Now, if the building's on fire, so you jump out the window because the building's on fire. Now it makes sense to jump out the window. But you just don't do something because somebody said do it. So we try to teach the kids the reason why these things work, why you do these things. So you have to teach reasoning, not just computation.
If I can add to that too, there's some resources out there that most people don't think to tap. And the Learning Center did an excellent job of doing this. For example, there's an association of the National Society of Black Engineers, I'm sure very much so, has chapters right there in Michigan. That's a great resource for math, computer science, STEM. It's a great resource. Most of those organizations have young people in there who would be willing to volunteer, but nobody asked them to do that. That's a great resource to go after. And many of those groups, like the computer science organizations, they're Black computer science organizations as well, accounting organizations. And if you can get the young people who just came to town, looking to get connected, looking to find their niche, because that happened to me, you can find them and get them early and get them engaged early because they're looking to meet people and get to know the community. So grab them early and get them engaged early, and they will be a resource for you. So I would encourage you to look at those resources.
There's a comment here. Let's see. I want to read it as it was said by the person here. Brother Shabazz, I wonder how the superintendent even thought to seek out Molefi. There must have been a black mole, a black broker who steered the super to Molefi. Weird. You want to respond to that? I know you.
Yes, it was his son. His son had a relationship with from Philadelphia, had a relationship with the Afrikan Centered community there. So it was his son that steered him in that direction. And it's important to say that the people who were responsible for doing this, for example, the school board president, the superintendent of schools, they've all gone on to much better careers. The school board president, an unpaid position, this gentleman by the name of Eric Leonard West, wound up being hired by the state of Texas in a paid position with a six-figure salary because he did such a good job for white supremacy. The superintendent left here to become the superintendent in Atlanta, in Fulton County, somewhere in there, at a substantial increase in salary. So you can do things, as you know, we all know very, very well, you can do things that compromise the interests of African people and do well in corporate America.
Brother Shabazz makes a statement. You want to respond to this, Ajamu?
Mm-hmm.
NBUF has now taken millions from whites.
And how much more do they owe us?
No, I'm asking that. Is that true?
What I don't understand. What was the
He's
question?
saying that NBUF has taken millions from whites.
From where?
Yeah.
If he is referring to the budget that we had for Afrikan Centered Education, those taxpayers.
No.
What?
He can't be, because that was not a budget for NBUF.
No, that was
It
for
was a budget for the public schools.
Right.
Well, if he's referring to NBUF, NBUF can't take money from anybody. It's in the Constitution.
That's right.
So be careful what you're saying there, Brother Shabazz.
Yeah, the
That,
Constitution.
that right there, what he's just described was a project that MBUF organized. The money went through the school system. The money went to teachers, administrators, didn't go to a single MBUF person, including Ajamu Webster that ran this thing.
Yeah,
So
and,
listen carefully when you hear stuff.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
I'm sorry for his misunderstanding. I may have not been clear in my explanation, so let me just clarify it right now. The Afrikan Centered Task Force Incorporated was a group that we put together to be the contract holder. That's what it did. No member of that board was ever paid a dime. There were 3 NBOF members who served on that board. None of them received a dime. Those dollars went through to educate children, administration, transportation, food service, all of that. If we had received a dime, believe me, when those allegations were made, we would have been indicted. None of that ever happened, and because we never received a dime. MBUF did not get millions of dollars, and so maybe I was not clear on how I explained that. So hopefully I clarified that.
Yeah, be very clear on that one. Okay, a lot of good comments about what a good show this was. Somebody said that people are going to be watching this for years to come. You better believe it. And hopefully you're going to use it. Wonderful job by both brothers. Let's see. Anything else? Worley Smith, it's a comment. Ultimately, parents and dedicated teachers who are interested and dedicated make the difference in determining education quality for our youth. Any comment on that?
That is ultimately, but in order to do that, you got to be empowered with what is best. And it's hard pressed for anyone without some type of research and study to be able to say this is the best education, because that's not what's available to us. We don't have that option. So you're choosing between bad options. So part of the struggle with us, from our struggle, was to provide that kind of information. What's the best? What's the appropriate? And we didn't answer that ourselves. I mean, that's what our connection to our scholars were. But ultimately, parents make that. But here's the deal. I mean, this is a hard lesson. And it was a hard lesson for us to deal with. Your enemies, when they come at you, they don't have to be right. They just got to spread enough confusion so that if you hadn't done a very good job or the best job of educating your base can freeze. The same, we see it all the time in corporate America. Folks know that eating meat is not healthy for you, but that's why they come out with these studies and say maybe it ain't so bad, just to spread enough confusion. The food industry is doing it. The pharmaceutical industry did it. The smoking industry does it. It's a strategy. And so we have to continue to reinforce what is Afrikan Centered Education, why is it important, so that our people can have the tools to be able to fend off the propaganda that comes at us that says, you know what you really want is a good place, comfortable place for your child in America. I mean, that's really the alternative, is a good, comfortable place for your child in America. So I agree. But that does not happen without continued reinforcement, education on what the options are, so we can decide the best option for our people.
Good point, because that can also be the way in which we excuse ourselves from not doing our own organizing. Oh, yeah, all it takes is good parents who are aware and stuff. Good parents who want their kids educated and who have got jobs, they're raising children, and then their kids are being miseducated and don't know how to build the power. So the people in the community who are doing the work, they got to do that work to connect those parents up. And that's not easy work, as you've just explained. Mm-hmm. Brother Shabazz corrected himself and said, my bad. That meant my mistake. He said, I was actually thinking of in Cobra, Institute of the Black World. That's a whole nother discussion. I
Yeah.
know what he's talking about. I ain't getting into it right now. But yeah, so be clear when you put something out what you're talking about. Be clear. You get corrected. Make sure, because you don't want to confuse honesty with dishonesty. So this has been a great show. This is the longest one we've done, and we do long shows. But I'm going to say something. This was necessary because y'all got an education, not just in information, which is very important, but how to build power in your community and on different levels. And so hopefully this is going to spark an interest in people wanting to do some systematic training around this. And I know I can count on Brother Ajamu Webster and Leon Dixon to help in this training. Have I got your commitment here?
You got it.
Hey. So, and Sister LaShonda Henderson, glad to see you on the show. And everyone else, we appreciate your participation. But Ajamu and Leon, it's beautiful, man. Really.
I just want to do a quick shout out to LaShonda Henderson.
Right on.
How many people tune in? Do you have?
I don't know. Well, you'll have to go to the actual show thing. It's usually 150 or so who come in and watch, and then this number here that's on the chat. So I don't know.
Well, in closing, I would also like to point out that the Learning Center, we didn't accept anybody's money that tried to determine what we was going to do. If somebody, we had people offer us money, we turned it down because they wanted to tell us how to work with our kids. Said, no, you can't tell us how to work with our kids. You know,
Yeah, I hear that.
and then I just wanted to point out, like I say, you have to learn how to use culture karate. Because one time the United Way had a program with corporate America where, like, if you make a donation, you could check out which organization you wanted your money to go to. Well, one of the sisters who was at the Learning Center saw that, and she said, you know, like, if you have a 501c3, which we did, so she checked and they said, yeah, the Learning Center qualified. So they organized a lot of the Black employees at the corporation to donate their contribution to go to the Learning Center. And the United Way got ticked off and they changed the rules.
Yeah, that's the name of power. That's what they're trying to do now with the demographic shift and stuff like that. I want to remind people to subscribe. 60% of our viewers are subscribers, 40% aren't. You 40%, you watching the show, you're getting a free show. It's quality stuff. Subscribe. And the other thing you see on the bottom of the screen here, thanks to our skilled technician here, Lawrence Freelo, you have the sites where you can make donations. So far, 3 people have donated. I'll give them credit next week, but I want to be sure they want to be given credit publicly. I don't want to state their names until we get their permission. But this show's been coming out of my pocket, $25,000 for the last year. So y'all need to come up to the plate and put a dime up. And I don't mean, you know, one of those silver dimes. You know what I'm talking about? Make a little donation, because I could go right now. We have a dedicated enough listenership. I can get corporate sponsorship. I've been fighting corporations all my life. I'm not interested in them uglifying the show with deodorant and stuff. Here I am talking about liberation, and we're going to have something about how you smell. Of course, I would be tempted if I got Alicia Keys. I'd put her on just to have her play the piano. She don't have to give me any money. Because that's one of my favorite young performers out there, and she's conscious. But other than that, this show's going to be based on whether or not you put up a little money to help us run this thing. It ain't going to me. This is going to the show. I've never accepted money for any movement I've led, and it's been 62 years of leading movements. And I don't lose, just like Ajamu and Leon Dixon, they don't lose. You hear me? We ain't into losing. So support the show and get more of your friends to support it as well. So I really want to thank you all. And it's been beautiful. And for all of you that were listening as well, thank you. Right on, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Right
Enjoyed
on.
it.
Hey.